Peace, family. Maurice here, friends of the Congo. Got a amazing, courageous brother with us, brother Gatubuke, Claude, and we're gonna uh, address a few items today. You know, around not only around what's been unfolding, this deja vu Claude and I can relate to. It feels like we're back in 2012, Claude.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
amazingly, I never would have guessed that we'll be here, 2025. You know, uh, yes. You definitely can. You can do
okay.
that. Um, Work with Keto to see how you make that happen. You know, yeah, man. So we're here. We often talk about this 30-year war of aggression and plunder, led by Paul Kagame of
Yeah.
Rwanda and Yoweri Museveni of
Mm-hmm.
Uganda. They've been the two constants, right?
Yeah.
That's caught the Great Lakes region in a death trap, whereby we had our sister Sylvia on the other day, and she's like, all I've known my entire life is war, right? Uh, because of these two individuals and how they've put themselves at service to the empire. I like the way the Congolese call them. They say neg de service. They,
Yes. Yes.
they, they're at service to the empire. Did we lose Claude? We lost him there for a little bit. Let's see if he can come back. We looks like we lost. He may have been trying to set up something there, Keto. But we're gonna speak with Claude Gatubuke of African Great Lakes Action Network, and have you back, Claude. Claude, tell us a little bit about yourself, because your background is critical to contextualizing really what has happened over the past 30 years, right?
Yeah.
In a lot of
Um,
respects.
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm actually planning to publish something for the first time I was in the Congo. It
Mm-hmm.
was in 1994 as a refugee
Mm.
fleeing the Rwandan war and genocide. So, my background, I was born in Rwanda, and um, I survived the genocide in Rwanda in horrible, um, just like near death experiences, including one where I was forced to dig my own grave, me and my mother.
Mm.
But also, even before that, there had been so many attempts on our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we ended up fleeing into the Congo, and I saw a report on, I think it was ABC News or something, that said this is the the standard by which human catastrophes are gonna be measured by in the future. Never seen anything like it. The it was talking about Goma, where I was at that time, with
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of thousands of other people, laid out in the yards, in the streets, people's storefronts, all kinds of places. And they said the volcanic rock ground that we were on, it
Mm.
was it's you can die on it, but you can't be buried in it. So you can't live
Mm.
to it,
Mm.
and you can't live on it. It was just like the way that it described the situation. And today, that makes me think of what is happening to the Congolese people at the hands of Rwandan troops, which I'm from Rwanda, but it's it's no shame for me to speak about the atrocities that Rwandan troops are committing in the Congo and causing such human catastrophe, even worse than what I experienced in that time, because this has been happening for the last almost 30 years, since 1996. And as Sister Sylvie said, there are people who were born in Congo that would have gone to, if their lives hadn't been disrupted, gone to elementary school,
Mm-hmm.
gone to high school, went to university,
Mm,
had children,
mm,
and almost at this time, in about another 10, 15 years, will be having grandchildren. And all they have known is war, displacement, destruction, can't find their families. They probably have people they've been waiting to find for the last 30 years. And of course, the people in the Kivus today, some of them is really fresh. Places like
mm,
Goma, for the last 3 weeks, people can't find their families. And so, my background is Rwandan, um, but you know, um, I think it's extremely important that Rwandan people, especially, do not remain silent, because
mm.
those who remain silent, we see the cheerleaders for Paul Kagame, we see the
Right,
cheerleaders
right.
for Yoweri Museveni, and it's important to know that when you are silent, you're just doing as much as those cheerleaders.
Mm,
The silence when these atrocities are happening is a horrible thing to do, and folks they should speak up, and they need to speak up. Otherwise, it's the world does not know what's happening. There's been a
mm,
whole cover up because
mm,
Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni are supported by Western, not only governments that protect them, that fund them, that train the militaries, especially the US and the UK, and now the EU. And France is like the leading cheerleader now, not only cheerleader, but one of the financiers for the RPF, which is the ruling party in
in Rwanda,
in
right?
Rwanda. Um, they are funding Uganda's occupation of parts of Congo to for French oil um, company Total to
Mhm,
protect those those um, um, those resources, the oil reserves. Rwandan troops, on the other hand, are doing it in Mozambique when it comes to oil.
mm,
Cabo Delgado, Rwandan troops are there securing French oil company Total's interest in Mozambique. And the Mozambican people have been protesting against the occupation for months now. Um,
mm,
so to summarize it, what is happening in the Congo today is something that started way back in the 80s
mm,
with Yoweri Museveni losing an election,
mm,
um, and then going and starting a bush war in in Uganda. 5 6 years later, he wins the war in 1986. So people who were born when he became president,
mhm.
they may have grandchildren right now.
Oh,
Some of the people
that's
when
in
he
40
became
years,
president.
right? 40
Yes,
years?
yes,
About just about almost.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
We share with people that's one of the constants, right, in the region.
mhm,
Like
yeah.
Kagame, 30 years for all
Hmm.
intents and purposes.
Hmm.
Museveni, 40 years.
Yeah.
And the Great Lakes region has been caught in a death trap, for that period. You said something interesting that U.S. trains their militaries, right?
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, both to show the depth, right, of the U.S. of both of these leaders who people trump as Pan-Africanists, to share the depth of their engagement and with the West. If I'm not mistaken, Claude, both of their sons, right, are in the trained by the U.S., right? Museveni's son was trained at Fort Leavenworth, right?
And,
And I
and
think
Kagame.
one or two of Kagame's sons is
So
at
Kagame trained at Fort Leavenworth. So
Kagame
he,
trained at Fort Leavenworth as well. Yeah.
yeah, and when he trained there, he
Mhm.
was a Ugandan. He was there as a Ugandan officer, not a Rwandan.
Right,
Um,
right.
and so this is how I was kind of given the summary of these criminals without borders. We have
Hmm.
doctors without borders, we have reporters without borders, we also have criminals without borders. Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni and their militaries are criminals without borders.
Hmm.
And what we have um, in 86 when Museveni won, Some of his fighters were exiled Rwandans that included Paul Kagame. 4 years later, Uganda's military, mostly those who were exiled Rwandans, invaded Rwanda
in 1990.
in 90, and they fought this 4 year war using methods similar to what they did in Uganda, where um, they would round the people up in large groups, kill them, and and then blame it on the other side. False flag operations, a lot of sexual violence during those 4 years in the war in Rwanda, um, and a lot of looting, stealing things and taking them back to Uganda, which is what's happening now. They're taking all the people's belongings in Goma and taking them to Rwanda. This is a practice that's been around for more than 40 years since Museveni's Bush War. So fast forward 1994, that war led to the genocide in 1994 in Rwanda, the genocide that I was talking about that I survived. Then fast forward to fast forward to um, um, let's see.
96, the
Yes,
first invasion, or
yes. And the at that time, then the Rwandan military invaded the Congo, went into, so they also go after the most vulnerable people. When I talk about like sexual violence and they use child soldiers, I mean there were people as young as I was, or maybe slightly older in Rwanda that were actually joining the RPF to go fight. The use of child soldiers also started back in Uganda. When that war started in 1990, Kagame was training at Fort Leavenworth as a Ugandan officer, and then he returned and became the leader of the RPF to fight in Rwanda. Fast forward in 1996, the RPF, which is now RDF, the Rwandan military, um, led by Paul Kagame, and the Ugandan military invaded Congo. They destroyed refugee camps. They went after the most vulnerable. A lot of the
yeah,
people who died were people who couldn't move, children,
yeah,
the elderly, the handicapped, the
yeah,
blind. Um, they went into Congolese villages and they killed Congolese people. They raped Congolese women. I mean, and in horrible ways. Not that there's any good way to rape somebody, but in some cases, I mean, they like mutilated people. And then I'm not talking about like the
you really can't even call it rape. It's a form of they terrorize the woman, right?
I mean, big time. I mean, like amputations of like, you know, their their genitals. I mean, there are things in there's so many reports also that talk about this, like the
Yeah, I
Garrett.
mean, the first one was I remember back in 96, 97, during
Yeah.
that first invasion, they talked Roberto Garreton did the
Hmm.
Garreton report, right?
Yep.
That documented these atrocities in painstaking, well, actually in gruesome detail, right? So there's
Hmm.
no shortage of reports on the terror that these two leaders orchestrated, right?
Yeah.
Commanded,
Yeah.
instrumentalized, right?
Yeah.
So what what is so striking and so important talking to you, Claude, because you talk about your personal history dating back then, but you also provides us with the opportunity to lay out, how it is that this 3 decade of gangsterism on the
Hmm.
part of these two leaders who have couldn't do what they're doing, right? Maybe you can share with us, couldn't do what they're doing without, Uncle Sam, without European Union, United Kingdom, uh, France. Uh, what are some of the ways in which you've seen how it is that these Western nations cover, for Kagame and Museveni? And why do you think that a lot of young Africans somehow think Kagame's like maybe an anti-imperialist, a Pan-Africanist? Like, what is it that I know part of it is a propaganda machine that is well oiled and it's on, high octane to really mess with the minds of young Africans. But maybe you can share what you've seen, in that regard.
Well, let's start with this. It's two questions you're asking. One
Mm-hmm.
is how is Kagame and Museveni been able to get away with this, and Western uh, nations leaders' involvement in it. The second question is why are the Africans why do so many Africans keep themselves, or why are they so fooled into believing that Paul Kagame is some type of Pan-African leader that actually is good for the continent? So let me start with a question you asked earlier about Kagame's
Children.
son going to
Okay.
school
Mm-hmm.
in the US. One of his sons, the oldest, went to West Point. I actually met some of his old classmates and one of his old roommates.
Mm-hmm.
And you
So let
know,
me ask, so Kagame's son went to West Point, right? One of his
mhm,
sons.
mhm.
Okay.
And when I had the conversation with the their, I don't know what their ranks are now. At the time, they were lieutenants and one was a captain. Um, the one who was his roommate at one point was a lieutenant then when I met them, and the captain in the group said, "I don't understand why." I don't understand why we would have somebody like that in an American military academy because he's not even American.
Mm.
And one of the others in the conversation goes, "Oh, it was probably just to make sure that, like he's nice to us and that his dad stays nice to us and that we have good relationships with him." So that was obviously that was not an official source saying that it's a
Right.
deal that was cut, but those are some of the privileges that they get. Obviously, he didn't finish the school because he didn't seem to be um, he didn't seem to be academically or maybe even discipline wise fit for the school. So now, fast forward to what Western governments have been doing with them. There has been a number of institutions that have gone after African leaders who can earn PhDs, either African leaders or African rebels who can earn a PhD from Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni in mass atrocities and genocide.
Mm.
Um, so we've got the ICC, we have the UN. The UN released a report. It's called the UN Mapping Report in October of 2010. The report stated that if taken to court, Rwandan troops could be found to have committed genocide in the Congo. It listed more than 600 major incidents, and it was only the major incidents. So meaning that like minor things were not talked about. Now, so they haven't done anything about that. They've not referred Rwanda to the ICC. Um, but Al Bashir, who committed
Mm.
crimes around that time, he was referred to the ICC because he was not friendly to Western governments.
Mm.
Every time those type of reports came out, even in 2012 when a report came out about the M23 the first time, which the M23 is Rwanda's and Uganda's military invading the Congo, that militia is basically those two armies.
Mm.
Um, the US mission to the UN blocked the reports from being released. Those reports were being released because they were leaked to the media.
Mm.
Now, the other thing is, um, Western governments, especially the US, the UK, now the European Union and France, they put a lot of resources into they stay in the impunity for Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni. They fund them, they provide them with a lot of aid.
Mm.
They provide them with diplomatic support,
Mm.
political cover, and especially shield them from accountability. If um, if you look at what happened with Zimbabwe, for example, with the sanction,
Mm. Mm.
this was in 2000. and that's when Robert Mugabe was dispossessing land from white farmers in Zimbabwe. That became such a big deal, both in the media, which the media has also been very complicit in the perpetuating of the suffering of people in the Congo because they refuse to present the conflict for what it is as an invasion of Congo's sovereignty by its neighbors with the support of the West. They refuse to do that. But when this was happening, Mugabe was so vilified, he was put on sanctions at every level, but yet these type of sanctions have never happened. They've never occurred with Rwanda and Uganda. A couple years ago, when the Russia-Ukraine war started, there was a big rush to sanction Russia all over the place for violating Ukraine's sovereignty. In and and this is happening today. It's been happening for the last 30 years. Rwanda has not been, and Uganda have not been sanctioned at all by those same nations. In fact, what is happening is these countries have provided military funding,
Mhm.
military training, all kinds of support. There is a reason why this so-called rebel, the M23, does not look like a traditional African or even like non-African rebel group.
Mhm.
Usually, when you see a rebel group, there is somebody wearing a, a purple Kobe jersey from,
Right.
from 1998, and a red Michael Jordan jersey, wearing flip-flops with a stick, and they're not that well equipped. When you look at the M23, it's a conventional army with goggles, with very well equipped. You can tell that is not a rebel group. This isn't an ethnic group that's just like revolting against the government.
Right.
It's an organized invasion. So the Western countries have also, what is, the question is, what is their benefit in supporting somebody like Kagame and Museveni? So Museveni and Kagame serve as the mercenaries of the West on the African continent.
Mm.
This also is part of anti-black racism and white supremacy that uses they sell out black people like the Paul Kagames and the UN Musevenis to kill other black people because
Mhm.
it looks better when a black person is killing another black person. You know what they call it in America? They call it black on black crime, even
Mhm.
though it's sponsored, paid for, protected by, and shielded from accountability by Western governments. So that's one thing. The second is they cut business deals with Western multinationals. A lot of companies are basically also involved in the exploitation of Congolese people by doing business through Rwanda, with Rwanda and Uganda, and making billions of dollars extracting and stealing resources out of the Congo. I mean, for those of us who've been following this for a long time, initially when the reports started coming out about like the amount of exports that Rwanda and Uganda were exporting of
Mhm.
resources they don't have in their soil, it was like, this is crazy. Then it started getting more and more and more. And it's like, how do they get all of these resources? How do they come up with so many so much resources that they didn't have the years before? Did they like
Right.
all of a sudden, they all of a sudden discovered mines, started mining them, developed all of this equipment, did all this work, and in the
Mhm.
space of 1 year, everything spikes. And
Yeah.
then you start looking at the reports now of the atrocities. What they would do is they used to go to, they used to time their attacks. They would wait until like the harvesting of timber was complete, the mining was done, and so many things were done, and then they would attack, take over the place, take all of that stuff, take the timber, take the minerals, take the gold, take the coltan, take everything, and they um, they would take it to Rwanda, they would take it to Uganda, and they would sell it on the global market. Now, I guess they realize, okay, we need to stay a little bit longer. Now they're like occupying, and they
Mhm.
occupy so that now they can control the mining. They can enslave the Congolese children as young as 10, 11, 12, to to have them um, in these mines working in horrible conditions, and then take those into Rwanda and Uganda and sell them to the global market. And that's how you get these Teslas. You get the, this fourth industrial revolution, the green revolution. The electric cars, the lithium batteries, the coltan that is used in our phones. All of that. Those are resources coming out of the Congo, and so that's why Western countries are complicit in it. Now, there has been some attempts to go after Paul Kagame and his military
Mhm.
for their crimes at the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. A prosecutor started to go after them for their genocidal crimes prior to, during, and after the genocide. And guess what happened to that prosecutor? The US got that prosecutor fired. And of course, Paul Kagame has also the kingmakers that support him, the Tony Blairs, the Bill Clintons, the Rick Warrens, and so many others in a variety of places, including also in academia.
Mhm.
Paul Farmer.
Claude, slow that down a little bit because so people understand the array of forces that are covering for Kagame, for example, in the midst of the war crimes, crimes against humanity, and possibly, even genocide, according to the UN, if brought in front of a competent court. So we talk about the governments, right? And then
Mhm.
you just listed a number of individuals. I'm not sure if people are familiar with these individuals. You mentioned like a Rick Warren, for example. Tell us, you know,
This is the pastor that actually was at Obama's inauguration. I believe he was the like the religious. I guess they have so many
he
ceremonies.
presided over
Yeah,
the
as
ceremony,
yes,
the inauguration
um,
ceremony.
right, right, and he's one of those well-known televangelists, um, evangelicals. I believe he's based in California, um, and the he's a very influential person,
Mhm.
and he has been in Paul Kagame's corner for a long time and has been very defensive of um, Kagame's crimes, and just treats him um, like an untouchable.
Right, and
Um,
he wrote a popular book, right? The Purpose Driven Life by Rick
yes,
Warren.
yes, yes, yes,
Right?
yes, yes.
So you have the government, the Western
Hmm.
government, and you can say faith institutions,
Hmm.
likes of
Academia.
Rick Warren,
Hmm.
right?
You have
And so
academia,
I'm sorry,
academia.
academia. So who
Yeah,
like some of the people in
media.
that? I saw this professor out of Harvard that somehow got into the Congo and was interviewing the M20, a Harvard professor.
Yes,
Tell us
yes.
about her. Like,
Um,
in
I'm
fact,
forgetting.
the Congolese foreign minister wrote a letter to, Minister Kaikwama wrote a letter. Wagner wrote a letter to Harvard about her, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm forgetting the woman's name.
Mhm.
But
We'll bring it up.
yes, but yes, she's a Harvard professor. The first time I saw her name, she was like whitewashing Kagame's crimes. And I was like, who is this person? And I think she also has like an African name, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
Kulibali, I think is her last
Koulibaly.
name.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
And I was like, okay, who is this West African person who is like spreading all of this false information and also promoting the killings of, um, of millions of Africans, like promoting a tyrant, somebody like Paul Kagame. And then I looked her up, and then I saw the work that she's doing, and it's basically like promoting Paul Kagame's narrative, promoting, in whitewashing his crimes. Now, there are some, as insidious as that is, there are others who are also just as insidious. There are professors. Yes, Boyana Coulibaly is the name. There are other professors who will sit and say, yeah, I don't just like call out like, RPF crimes. Like I look at like both sides, those people who do both siding
Hmm.
and who talk about a middle ground
Hmm.
and, um, and I guess balancing. Anytime I see somebody that is talking about balancing when human beings are being killed, when somebody's doing that work, I already know they're standing with the perpetrator. They're looking for ways to whitewash the perpetrator. So it's like there's been a lot of gatekeeping also in academia, and then of course the media.
Well,
Um,
let's stick with academia for a sec, because it's not solely the professors, right? It's the institutions themselves as well. The
mhm,
presidents of these universities, president of Harvard, president of Brandeis, president of Carnegie, right?
mhm.
Uh,
Carnegie
you know,
Mellon.
Carnegie
Yeah,
Mellon, right?
there's
So
one.
it's institutional support.
There's one guy named Mike O'Neill.
Hmm.
And I hope you're watching Mike O'Neill. In 2010, Mike O'Neill was the president of Oklahoma Christian University.
Mm.
When at that time, there's like a few weeks before Kagame went there to give like a commencement speech, we found out that he was going to be there, and we went there and we protested and also served him with a lawsuit, in which, by the way, speaking of Western governments, he was sued for crimes he committed before he was president. And
Mm.
Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama gave impunity to Paul Kagame for
Right,
those crimes, for that lawsuit that we served him
right.
with. And
Wasn't some kind of waiver they gave, like presidential decree or
it
something?
was it was a suggestion of immunity. That's,
Mm.
that's what they did. And
Mm.
so they let him off the hook for crimes that
Hmm.
even
So,
an American president or a former American president cannot get
mm.
away with. They have impunity while they're presidents, but crimes they committed before they were presidents, they can
Hmm.
be persecuted for those. And
Mm.
they give Kagame immunity for that. Now, back
So
to
an
Michael.
American president given Kagame immunity for crimes that he committed
Right, right,
against other
right.
black people in Africa.
Yeah,
Black
right, right,
president.
right. Thank you. And
Mm.
remember, the Clinton connection is deep.
Right.
Paul Kagame was a speaker at the Clinton Global Initiative, which
Initiative.
I think has been accused of like misuse of funds and things like that for like Haiti relief and so many
Mm.
different things. But he was an annual speaker at that event. And anytime something blows up about Kagame's reputation, Bill Clinton comes to the rescue. And
Right.
so the
So
Obama.
Claude, let me just like just walk
Oh,
people through.
Doris,
Just
hold the
go ahead. Go
question.
ahead.
I need to
Yes. Go
finish
ahead.
about Mike
Yes.
O'Neill.
Go ahead, please. Yes.
Mike O'Neill,
Mhm.
the president of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma Christian University,
Mhm.
later became the president of Rwanda's university, Rwanda's national university. That's where I was
Mm.
taking that story. So there are people
Mm.
who are also in there grifting. Is a grift
Like
for
Tony Blair, for example, right?
right, right. Tony
Yeah.
Blair is on a grift. Yeah.
Hmm.
But anyway, go
So
back to the question.
yeah,
I just
no,
want to
no.
finish
So
the story about Mike
because
O'Neill.
people ask, they'll ask, why has this war been going on for so long? 3 decades, and how is it able to continue? And uh, what you're laying out is really a complex of systems that are in place to facilitate the impunity that we see in the Great Lakes region, right? To block any type of accountability for the perpetrators, like the
Mhm,
orchestrators of the crimes, right?
mhm,
The those who are pulling the strings, and we're not even can't even get to the level of justice, right?
Mhm.
because, as you said, even on an international entity that was set up, right, to bring about justice, when there was an attempt to bring about justice,
Mhm.
the person responsible for doing that was pulled away, was, taken out of the job,
Right.
right?
Right.
So just like the way you're breaking it down is just letting people know step by step why we see this, the deadliest conflict in the world since World War II, hundreds of thousands of women systematically raped and terrorized, how it is that it's been able to continue, right? Because of the cover that and the connections,
Mhm.
that Paul Kagame and Yaro Museveni have, right?
That's right. That's right. And also, um, in some cases, I don't know if those connections are personal, but I'll give you an example. We know Museveni is a serial human rights abuser. Um, he's been killing people for at least, almost, for 40, more than 40 years. Same for Paul Kagame. During the height of their crimes, or a little bit after the height of their crimes in the Congo, which they're still committing today, the ICC, instead of going after Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni, um, the two
That's
things,
an international criminal court, right?
International Criminal Court, they
Mm-hmm.
had a black African um, prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda. If I recall correctly, she actually showed up and was, or maybe it's Ocampo, but I think it's Fatou Bensouda, that showed up at the inauguration of Yoweri Museveni, while at the same time, pursuing al-Bashir. And people who've had conversations with her, she'd say that Paul Kagame was justified in the things that he's done. So you can also see that a prosecutor that is supposed to be going after like the worst crimes refuses to go after the worst criminals
Mm-hmm.
in Congo, and so
Right.
they'll go after people like Bosco Ntaganda. I
Mm-hmm.
forgot his associate, the other person that was prosecuted at the ICC, but they will leave Kagame, similar to how I think it was the US last year, if not the year before, that sanctioned Rwandan officers, and they were sanctioned like some low-ranking
Right.
officer, but
Right.
the generals, they didn't touch any general or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so all of that, it's a full package of like a global network of enablers, people who have enabled and allowed Kagame and Museveni to get away with these crimes because, again, it benefits these Western multinationals and these Western governments protect them. So you've got all of that, and the media is another one. They
Yeah.
refuse to call it for what it is. An
Mm-hmm.
invasion, a territory. They're finally coming around, and that's thanks to the um, Congolese people who refuse to go silent when these
Mm-hmm.
atrocities are taking place, and all the other people around the world that refuse to be silent. What is happening, because this is a plunder, thieves do not like noise.
Mm-hmm.
Noise chases thieves out, and the noise has gotten so loud they can no longer ignore and pretend that this is not happening. They just now in a really awkward position. They don't know what to do with the monsters that they created, the Paul
Mm-hmm.
Kagames and the Yoweri Musevenis, because at this moment in time they are still useful. Um, there's I forget who it is that said, yeah, that person is a son of a bee, but
But
that's
he's
our son of a
our,
bee.
that's Henry Kissinger.
There you go. They
Yeah.
say, yeah, that's our son of a bee. So they're
Mm-hmm.
still their sons of bee, bees in this moment. Eventually, they will discard them, and
Mm-hmm.
it's all a
Just as
matter.
they discarded Mobutu,
That's
right?
right.
You
Yeah,
know,
um, Mobutu was one of their favorite puppets on the
Hmm.
continent, and he was a great servant, obviously involved with the CIA and the Belgians' assassination of Lumumba, and also facilitated logistical support for apartheid South Africa, invaded
Hmm.
neighbors, Angola, supported rebellion in Angola.
Right. A
All
pipeline
of
to
those,
Savimbi. Absolutely.
right, all similar things to what Paul Kagame is doing
Mm.
today and Yoweri Museveni. And I guess at the time when it was time to discard Mobutu, they brought in Museveni and Kagame, who Bill Clinton, I think it was Bill Clinton that said they were the new breed
Yeah,
of
Bill Clinton, Madeleine Albright, and Susan
Madeleine.
Rice, right?
Yep, Madeleine Albright said that they were the beacon or
The
something
new
like that,
Renaissance
New Renaissance,
leaders,
and
new
somebody
breed of
called them
African leaders, the new Pan Africanists. I heard
right.
it. It's kind of funny because this has been the imprimatur, right? Was put
Hmm.
on them by U.S. empire. Madeleine
Right.
Albright, Susan Rice, Bill
Hmm.
Clinton, and unfortunately, young Africans picked it up, and they're like, "Oh, he's the model leader, like Kagame, and
Yep.
he represents the future of Africa that we ought to,
Oh yeah.
emulate." Not
Yeah.
knowing that this was like a product of U.S. propaganda.
Yeah, they ate it up. They ate
Yeah.
it up. And so now back to the Africans.
Hmm.
Let me talk to you, my brothers and sisters. Don't you kid yourself. Let me put it that way. That Paul Kagame is anything Pan-African. Pan-Africanists do not kill millions of other Africans. Pan-Africans do not serve as mercenaries of Western nations against their own sisters and brothers. Pan Africans do not steal resources to benefit multinationals while impoverishing the local people. What Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni are doing in the Congo is is a sellout. They have sold Africans out. And you may be far away from Rwanda, but if you were close and there were resources, Kagame will be used to come and take over your area, your city, your village, rape the women, destroy the community, and steal the resources for multinationals. That is who they are, my sisters and brothers. That is who we're talking about, Paul Kagame. So do not kid yourself that this guy is anything that is good for the continent. I know that the propaganda has worked in selling the Rwanda is clean,
Hmm.
the Kigali is clean. It's not really all of Rwanda, but Kigali is clean, and yeah, it's nice if you go there for tourism, but to live in that place is like living in an open air prison. And I know many people may not care about that because you may not understand that. But there is a reason why so many Rwandans self censor and they don't talk about these atrocities happening in Congo and the way they live in Rwanda. My fellow genocide survivors like Imable Karasira. Look him up. He was a university professor and an artist. He's languishing in prison today, almost 4 years. His trial has not completed, and they're accusing him of denying the genocide. By the way, a genocide that he survived, only for telling his own story of survival. The Deo Shahidi is another one that you can look up. And on this date, 5 years ago, a popular gospel
Hmm.
musician, Kizito Mihigo, was announced dead in custody 4 days after he was arrested by Rwanda's authority for a second time,
Hmm.
accused accused of initially of plotting against the nation. Now, what they didn't realize was that Kizito was documenting what was happening to him, and he leaked it out, and
Hmm.
he got the information out to the rest of the world about the torture that he underwent and how he was forced. First they disappeared him, they tortured him, and then they made him admit that he plotted against the president, which is of course was it was a big lie. It was debunked. They released him, and then After releasing, he spent 4 years in prison. They released him, and then 2 years later, they um, rearrested him, and 4 days later, he died in
Claude,
custody.
Claude,
Hey,
you
yeah.
know, there's so many things I want you to talk about, but this part that you just brought up is so critical that people don't see, and the average person have a hard time believing, and that is if you run counter to, let's call him Mr. 99%, right? That's how many votes. that's a, that's a percentage that he got. He's, 99%, right? So we got 99 problems, and Kagame,
Right. And
fix all of them, right?
Kagame is all 99.
All 99, right? So, we did an event with you in Atlanta. I just want you just share with people the what it's like to run against, to be up against Kagame, or just dissent, right? Nyamwasa gave an interview to South African Broadcasting Corporation, giving us some insights. But we were doing an event with you in Atlanta, and there are a bunch of Kagame supporters in the audience, right? And of course, you were just telling your story. And one of the questions that they got up and they asked you, how would you like to be remembered, Mr. Gatuike? Right?
Right, right, right.
So can you just take off from
Yeah.
there and just give us a
So,
sense of what it means to be a dissident against Paul Kagame, that's got the full backing of the Western intelligence services and full reign to move and track down whoever he wants, no matter where in the world, rendition them back to Rwanda and torture
mhm.
them? Maybe you can just give people an insight as to. I think you covered in your book too. So just talk about it
Yeah,
within the context of the book.
yeah. So, the whenever you speak up, you expose the crimes, even just telling your own story of, because there are so many people who like whose families have come up missing. Like my generation, there was a research that showed that there is almost 600,000 individuals that have come up missing. These are people who were born between the year 1980 and 2006. This study was done in 2015, and that many people have gone missing. Uh, their mothers, when they go looking for them, they are also tortured.
Mm.
There is a story of like in the book. There's
What's the
one
title
of
of your
them.
book so people
It's
will
called
know?
"Survivors Uncensored."
Mhm.
100 testimonies of Rwandan survivors from pre, during, and post genocide Rwanda. Yeah. And this guy, Jean Damour Ngirinshuti, he um, he was a supporter of Diane Wigara,
Mm.
another she was a presidential candidate against Paul Kagame. Paul Kagame has arrested every woman that's ever ran against him
Yeah.
legitimately. So while he was busy arresting Diane Wigara and her mom and her sister, he also went after the supporters. And Jean Damour Ginshuti, when his mom went to look for him, they tortured her also. He's been missing since 2017. That's just one of, like I said, my generation, one of those 600,000 people. He had been tortured. People who had been in custody with him say that he was in really, really like terrible shape. The ones who were able to talk to his mother. The person who helped, so they started now monitoring his mom. And I'm telling this story because a story of one person can tell a story of like thousands of others.
Mhm.
They started stalking her. They had like police and so many people like just watching and following her and stalking her everywhere. Eventually, she was able to escape. The person who helped her escape, the official, they killed that official.
Mm.
And so there is like in Rwanda, when you go up against the narrative, the official narrative, or even any of the atrocities that they commit, they start looking for you. If you're in the country, they'll assassinate you. They'll put you in prison for a long time, torture you. Um, And sometimes you just go, you come up missing. There's another story in our book. David Ndayambaje. David was he was picked up among dead bodies during the genocide. He was a baby during the
Mm,
genocide. He doesn't know his mom, his dad, his siblings, where he was born, nothing.
mhm,
You know, he was a little baby when they picked him up. So he grew up, you know, with different people. But then when he became older, they would not give him um, like an identity card or health coverage or anything like that because they could not. Basically, they were saying, hey, if we don't know your parents and we don't know where you're born, where you're from, and all of that stuff, you can't get the paper. So he formed an organization of children like him, or it was young men and women like him, started advocating for him. Once he spoke in the media
mhm,
about his about what was going on with him, they went and kidnapped him, the police, and they held him in a dark cell, painted black, for
mhm,
months, and nobody knew where he was. And eventually, they released him, and they ordered him to take back his statements. He refused. And then when they were plotting to come and snatch him again, somebody somebody told him, "Hey, they're coming after you," and he escaped. So now he's in exile. That is, those are the type of things that happen to people. The last one I'll give you is Paul Rusesabagina, a
mhm,
person, and this is again, I'm telling this story because it happens in so many places, especially on the African continent, and it goes untold and unsaid, but
mhm.
because he is a famous person, he is the real life hero of the film Hotel Rwanda that was the Hollywood film that was played by Don Cheadle about, you know, a man who sheltered over 1,000 people in a hotel during the genocide, and it was hard. Me and my mom and my sisters and many others took shelter in at least three different homes
Mhm.
during the genocide. Um, the to hide somebody at that time, to shelter somebody at that time, it was like a major risk that you could also get killed.
Mhm.
Now, when the film came out, the Rwandan government wanted to give him an award, and he refused to take the award. Eventually, he turned on them, in fact,
Mhm.
and started speaking out against them. They tried to assassinate him in Belgium. They would stalk him, just like they were stalking me in that event in Atlanta,
In
right?
Atlanta, yeah.
And they come and threaten and say, "How would you like to be remembered?" Basically saying, "Yeah, you're gonna get killed," you
Mhm.
know. And I mean, like, what's new here? Every person's gonna die. The most important thing is we got to make sure that we as long as we breathe, live and breathe, that we are doing everything possible to make the world a better place than we found it, and
Mhm.
that people like Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni that are going around killing people are not able to just simply get away with it. Anyway, back
Right.
to Rusetsabagina. So now, you know, same thing was happening to him. Eventually, in 2020, they used one of his friends. So this is one of the other methods they use. They use family and friends. They actually will befriend people with the purpose of getting access to people that they're looking to assassinate, to kidnap, to kill. And sometimes there are some book like that book, what is it called? I'm forgetting, by Michaela Wrong. It talks about um, how they actually asked one woman to assassinate her husband, if I remember correctly, or a husband to assassinate the wife. But anyway, it was a spouse assassinating a spouse. They tried that. So now they use his friend. His friend trapped him and told him, "Hey, come on, we'll go to Burundi and we will set you up with a bunch of speaking engagements. You know, speaking on peace and reconciliation and stuff like that." So he gets on a plane, he goes to Dubai. When he got to Dubai, they put him on a private jet. According to him, they poisoned him or they gave him something to put him to sleep. When he woke up, he was in Rwanda. at the airport in Rwanda. This is so similar. Kizito, the artist that I talked about, it was the same. Like they blindfolded him and they kept him for days, and then eventually they paraded him in front of the media. And so when we saw Paul Rusesabagina, he was being paraded in front of the media with a bunch of microphones and cameras and stuff like that. And the reason they do stuff like that is to try to scare people into silence. Thankfully, that didn't actually create silence. It created a lot of noise. Eventually, here is now how we know that these Western countries can actually do something about these things. Um, Paul Kagame said, "You will never get this guy out of here unless you invade Rwanda." Um, there was a friend of mine who he at the time he didn't have access to like media and stuff like that. And I talked to him later on, and I was like, "Hey, did you know that Paul Rusesabagina was released?" And he laughed out loud. He goes, "Well, didn't Kagame say that somebody had to invade Rwanda, and before he would release him?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, they did. They just didn't use weapons." The U.S. say that they will not give him 90. They threatened to not give him $90 million of aid, and boom, he released him. So there is all kinds of leverage that Western countries have on him and Museveni that they refuse to use
Right.
because he is their son of a bee.
Right.
He's the son
The
of a
friendly
bee.
tyrant. Let's
Yeah,
pull up. Let's. We're coming down to a close. Let's talk about that. The actions that people can take to apply pressure on Kagame's backers that can provide relief, for the Congolese people in the absence of the Congolese government and leadership not being able to do that. So we
yeah.
talk about the lifted, holding back of aid. What are some of the pressure points that you see?
Yeah. So I do think that it's important that we all understand that we all carry a piece of the Congo, with in our devices, and as consumers, we can help, and as witnesses of these atrocities, we can help. And one of the things that definitely worked previously was withholding of aid from Rwanda by multiple countries. This was the previous iteration of the M23, which is Rwanda and Uganda's military. That's the name of the Rwanda and Uganda's military occupying and invading the Congo. So
Right.
now these
This was in
guys,
2012.
2012, they withheld aid. The M23 had gone down. They'd taken Goma, I think, at that time also. They've taken over so much territory, and they were doing all this celebrating. And all of a sudden, when the aid was halted, and there was an international brigade, I forget the exact name of that international brigade,
For the Force Intervention Brigade.
Force Intervention Brigade. They were smoked out in less than 3 months and went all the way to Uganda, stayed in Uganda in hibernation for 10 years, and then they reinvaded again in late 2021, early 2022. So withholding of aid is one. A second thing that people can do on their own is those who want to do tourism or travel to Rwanda, do not travel to Rwanda. Don't go to Rwanda. Don't visit Rwanda. Um, another thing is, similar to how people are like selling their Teslas and donating their money to like companies that or organizations that Elon Musk is like going after, like NPR, for example. Um,
Oh, people are doing that. They're selling their Teslas and donating to like NPR.
like yeah. So, don't sell your phone, but use your phone to actually educate other people. Like spread the news about don't visit Rwanda and make it a big thing. If you are a student and you're in a school, research and see if your school is investing in
Mm.
your school from investing in Rwanda. We have to get into um, those who have the skills, reach out to friends of the Congo. Let's work on divest for Congo. Um, and so do not consume products out of Rwanda. continue to call out in Uganda, continue to call out these leaders, go to freecongo.org for more actions. But one of the most important is do not do tourism in Rwanda, and amplify these messages, this news, this, what is happening today needs to be made, the world needs to be aware.
Mm,
In order for change and real change to come, the truth has to be spread.
right.
The
That,
truth
that
will need to,
narrative is so critical, Claude, that story that you're telling.
in order, yeah, the world is dominated by those who are able to tell their story best. And at this point, the rabbit needs to have the gun. You know, it ain't fun for the hunter when the rabbit has the gun. So you be the rabbit that tells the story of what is happening to the people in the Congo. And so I think that's really important. I did want to engage with the audience, especially I do want
Yes.
to, um, I want to be the first to say welcome to all the Kagame and 70 supporters in the audience. Hello and welcome. Come
I
on
don't know
in.
what it is
What
about
questions
you,
do you have?
Claude. You seem to attract them. I mean, they really like to follow you.
Oh, look, even the embassies send people. So for me, it's, hey, you want to
Part
come?
for the
The
course.
message not going to change. Like, we're
Hmm.
not going to be intimidated, regardless of whether we meet in person or we meet online. So bring it. I want to see what questions or, what kind of feedback they are
Well, they're
pushing.
saying you're divisive. What you're just dividing people. You're not, not going to bring about a solution based on what you're sharing. Uh,
So wait, I'm divisive.
yes,
And
you
what's wrong
know.
with being divided, from mass murderers? Like, is that a bad thing? Who said we have to, like, why would it be a good thing? It's actually a horrible thing to want to unite with those who are doing mass rapes of women. No, we need to stand and take a stand to where they are held accountable. So no, exactly. We have to separate the people who are being harmed from those who are harming them. Because if you keep them together, that's like, again, hey, you have the hunter and the rabbit, and you have them all in one place. That's not a good thing. And um, the the truth will unite people. Justice will unite people. And sometimes, the saying goes, if the truth shall kill them, let them die.
Mm,
It's We cannot be in the business of creating fake unity,
mm,
of um, saying, hey, if when you have a brother that is selling you out, you have a brother that's taking you to the highest bidder and taking you to the butcher shop and butchering the people, enslaving your people. It's not our job to unite with them. It's our job to not to expose them, to expose those who are doing all the harm, and to hold them accountable, to push for justice, because justice is what's going to bring about lasting peace.
mm.
So, sorry that, whatever, however divisive this is, sometimes it has to be, because we have to know, everybody stands needs to be known. Where do you stand? You stand with justice or with injustice? There is no middle ground.
Beautiful. I think we'll leave it there, Claude. That's a beautiful note to leave it on. We're gonna have to have you back. There's so much more to share. But I thought it was, we thought it was important to hear a progressive Rwandan's point of view. Other than the trolls, tons of trolls that are out there that
By
are
the way, they get
masters of
paid.
insults.
They
Go
have,
ahead.
there's been research that shows that they use AI to, to basically create those trolls. But also in our book,
Mhm,
Survivors Uncensored, there are people who actually were trained as part of these
mm,
trolls. They talk
mm,
about their experience.
mhm.
They talk about how they would take them to like all these conferences, and they would like recruit them and teach them how to do this, how to harass the people who are out here, you know, calling out the crimes of the regime. So this is something, it's an organized, like you
Oh
called
yeah.
it international gangsterism. It's
Hmm.
very organized crime and very organized cover up, and they pay a lot of money. It's very expensive for them
Yeah, that's why
to.
it's so critical for us, people who are watching us, to the narrative and telling, the truth about what has unfolded in the Great Lakes for the past 3 decades, with the United Nations as the deadliest conflict in the world since World War II, the deadliest cover-up, deadliest propaganda in the world, right? So each and every one of us can spread the word, disrupt, the narrative coming out of Kigali, and amplify the narrative of Congolese who've been the victims of these two types. And I don't want to personalize it, because there are types of agents of the empire, agents of neocolonialism, agents of imperialism, that's wreaking havoc on African lives. So, brother, thank you so much. Really appreciate the work that you're doing, and the bravery and the courage, because I know all the threats and just
You've been
what you're
around.
doing. Yeah,
You've seen
man.
some of
Yeah,
it.
I know what you have had to go through with these folks. Can you imagine? I mean, just being giving a presentation, having your own countrymen stand up and say, "How do you want to be remembered, Mr. Gatabuke?"
Hmm.
I'll never forget that.
Yeah, yeah,
And that I'll never forget that. So
yeah.
keep on keeping on, man.
Gotta
We
keep it
got you.
up.
All
You gotta
right.
keep it
Thank
up.
you, brother.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Peace, peace.
Free Congo. Free
Free
Congo.
Congo.
Yeah.
Jail Kagame.
That's right. That's right.
Yes.